Hello. So today I am back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about UX and why UX is the solution to all of our problems, and will save the world. So full disclosure, I used to be a UX designer, and what a UX designer does, or user experience designer, is they are in charge of everything in between the end user and the behind-the-scenes tech of a system, right? So for example, Google. Google is literally just a web search algorithm and a database attached to it, but you don't see any of that, right? So you, the end user of Google, do not see the behind the scenes tech of Google. What you see is the homepage of Google, the search bar, how that search bar kind of makes you feel, what happens when you hover your mouse over a certain button, how the results come up, and how all of that feels very distinctly Google, right? So there's no point, hopefully, in the entire process where you think you're using Amazon, right? Because every single step in the process has been very neatly integrated and very customized in a very Google way, right? So the feel, the look, how it works, how it looks, everything like that, all of that falls under the umbrella of UX design. Cool. So that's what UX generally is, and everything I say from this point forward will largely be based on the work of a very interesting thought leader in the space named Mr. Bret Victor, right? So please look up Mr. Bret Victor if you have not heard of him. But he is an extremely thoughtful and inventive kind of uh, person who blends both tech and humanities in a way that I've really never seen before. And I'm just really big fan of his. And so please check him out. Cool. So I'll go for a few examples of why UX is so important because you might not have thought of certain things as UX before. So, for example, let's talk about math for a second, right? Don't worry, it's not anything technical, but let's talk about math. Most people don't like math. Most people hate math. But what people like Mr. Bret Victor kind of go over is that the reason why most people don't like math is because it's presented in such a convoluted way. Not in just like the way it's taught, but the way it's actually formatted and the way that we actually do it. So for example, imagine you are a Roman in the first century, right? You use Roman numerals, right? You've seen them, IV, VI, things like that. So you can't do very advanced math with Roman numerals, right? You could try, right? So you could try to doing integral calculus with Roman numerals, but even the most advanced mathematicians will have a hard time either enjoying that or even just doing it in general, right? So even if you are the smartest mathematician in your entire generation, you are limited by the tools of your time, and you might not even know it. That's the thing. You might not know that you're being limited by the tools of your time because that's all you know, right? The limits of your tools are the limits of your world, right? That's small plagiarism of a Wittgenstein quote, but the limits of your tools are the limits of your world. So you don't even know that anything else is possible, right? So it wasn't until thousands of years later, not thousands, hundreds of years later, when Arabic numerals were introduced to the West, right? So Arabic numerals meaning the numbers that we use now, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., right? And base 10 Arabic numerals were introduced to the West, that you start to get this explosion of mathematics in that era just because we had better tools, right? So it's a very clear example of the problem was not that people were not smart enough or that there weren't enough kind of sponsorship or money that was going into academia. It was literally that we didn't have the tools. We didn't have the tools that allowed our minds to think in a certain way, right? And I think that's number one, a great tragedy and just a great kind of uh, what's the word for it? A great hope, actually, too, right? So it's a great tragedy and a great hope, because number one, it's a great tragedy that all those generations past, that didn't really have the right tools to be able to think, to be able to produce all this advanced thought. But it's also a great hope that the limits don't lie in just like our pure brain power and our pure kind of collective genius, but if you just change the tools, right, just a very small change, right, then you can produce this explosion of thought, right? And so again, yes, it's sad that all those mathematicians didn't have Arabic numerals, but on the other hand, how grateful we should be that somebody invented Arabic numerals in the first place so that we could have all this advanced thought today. You know what I mean? Another example is the Cartesian coordinate system. So this is the coordinate system that you learn in school, x, y, like this, right? So if you have like a point, like say 5, 2, right, then you go 5, 2, right? So that's the Cartesian coordinate system. And it was literally invented by this guy named Descartes, French Enlightenment philosopher. You might have heard of him. And before this, right, before the Cartesian coordinate system, the way to visualize functions was extremely scattershot, right? So today we could visualize all sorts of relationships, right? So we could have, x equals y, right? So you could just like chart that in a very straight line, and you can see, oh, this is how this relationship literally looks, right? Or a quadratic, right? You can very visually see that a quadratic equation forms a parabola, right? Or a sine function or a wave, or things like that, right? But before this kind of mode of thinking was invented, you didn't really have that. And so if you see an equation like y equals x squared plus 4x, what does that mean? In theory, you can know. And if you're a math genius, then yes, you can kind of like try to visualize it in your head, right? But without that kind of very clear frame of thinking, it's very difficult to know what that even means. And it's just like numbers. It's literally all just Greek to you. So just kind of having that frame of mind to be able to think in that way, to think in that visual like way, is just a massive kind of upgrade in your thinking. Cool. And more recently, the examples all come from computing actually. So if you are old enough to remember, the first computers were all terminal computers or terminal type computers, right? So like they were kind of black screen, green text, right? So you kind of type in a command, and so let's say it's a video game or something, right? So let's say you're controlling a rocket, so you say rocket move x10, and then you get a message that says the rocket has moved x10, things like that, right? So it was all text based, which seemed fine for the time because that was kind of the state of the art. But somebody invented graphical user interfaces, and so instead of typing commands to the computer, you could actually see the rocket and control it with a joystick, right? And just think about how much better of a game that is compared to you move rocket, X, move rocket Y, dodge, things like that, right? Just like typing versus actually doing it is such a better experience, that alone caused that explosion of like gaming in the 70s and 80s, right? So things like Pong and Galaga and things like that, if you remember, a lot of that kind of came from kind of that era. Graphical user interfaces, right? Drag and drop, a lot of things like that, where navigating a folder system in a computer used to be extremely cumbersome, and nobody really wanted to do it because obviously it required a lot of kind of technical expertise, first of all, and nobody wants to spend hours at a time just kind of scrolling through different kind of library-like slots. But if you have things like a picture of a folder, let's say, and you can drag things into it, then you can now have a different way of thinking about it. Instead of, oh, I am dealing with a purely digital version of real life, I could say, oh, this is kind of almost like a video game, right? You can pick something up and you can drag something into a folder, and that's really cool. A lot of things like that that kind of massively open up your ability to think about things. So as you can tell, a lot of these are kind of massive improvements in people's thinking that were only unlocked at a certain moment, but as soon as they're unlocked, they kind of lead to a golden age or renaissance of creation, right? So whether it's mathematics, whether it's video games, whether it's computing, things like that. And so that's what I really mean when I say that UX is everything. User UX, in the literal sense of user experience, how the user experiences something, is usually the bottleneck in whatever kind of technological advance you're trying to make, rather than just computing power, right? So again, you could have the most advanced mathematicians using the most advanced tools in a certain era, but even that won't compare to the impact that you could have by just switching the tools, switching the perspective, right? So Mr. Victor, he calls the inventors of calculus, right, Newton and Leibniz the UX designers of today, and they really were. Because rather than just kind of use the current tools, they invented new tools and they invented new notations, right? They invented, the famous calculus notation that you see in math class, and that signals a very different frame of mind. So rather than thinking of very discrete kind of steps, this is a continuous addition of a function from one point to another, right? And so that just that small kind of visual step was able to change everything. Cool. Okay, a few steps, a few points about the future. Let's go over them. So obviously we need to talk about AI. Again, AI is a massive, massive opportunity for this. Right now, as I said, everybody's focused on the bigger data centers, more processing power, everything like that. But I think a lot of people can tell that the bottleneck in AI is not in the processing power, or it's not in the AI just itself. It's in how people interact with it. It's in how people can see the results and how people can work with it. Right now, many people are getting very sick of the current paradigm of you send the AI a prompt and then it returns a result, right? So you send the AI a prompt of generate me an essay about this, or generate me an image about this, and so forth, right? So you just get kind of very back and forth, almost like a master-servant relationship, and you don't get any creativity, right? So there's no satisfaction in sending a prompt and just getting like a response back, right? There's no satisfaction in just generating an image and it's like, oh, this is art. You know what I mean? But everybody knows, and everybody can kind of see coming, that something like that is possible. It is possible to create AI art collaboratively together with an AI that is not kind of as soul crushing as the current image gen paradigms are. And so who will invent that? I don't know. And what would that look like? I also don't know. And so currently I am completely useless in this respect, but I just want to kind of throw it out there that the advances that you're looking for might not come in the ways that, or in the places you expect. It might not be the company that invests $1 billion into a giant data center. It might be just like some random kid that comes up with like a slightly different way of just looking or interacting with an AI that kind of ends up changing everything, and kind of unlocks a new renaissance of of thought and of innovation. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for listening to my mini rant. But I hope this was kind of interesting. And I would encourage you to think about more things as UX problems. Again, yes, a lot of results, both in the world and in life, I think come from hard work and effort and intelligence. And I think that's obviously very true and will be true for a very long time. But you'd be surprised at how many 10x improvements that can be made just by changing the tools, just by changing the kind of the frame of thinking that your entire kind of brain is at. And if you are also hardworking and smart and everything like that, on top of that, then those tools will just 100x your capabilities, right? So imagine Aristotle with like calculus, right? Like imagine what he could have done. A lot of missed opportunities there. Cool. All right. Well, see you guys.